So welcome everyone to Yoga Tuesday afternoon. What we're going to do today, what I thought would be helpful, is to look at the deep flexion and extension pathway that we've looked at a number of times in a number of ways. So I'm going to spend the first part of the class looking at that in sitting, kneeling, and standing. So you'll need a chair, and we'll just hang out with it so you have a chance to feel it in your body and notice the similarities and remember. And I think it's a very important sequence. And in fact, in yoga, in traditional yoga, Surya Namaskar, so the salutation to the sun, is very much about getting the body to make this movement. And then we'll take it into rotation, and which is really the deep longing of the body. Flexion and extension is something we need to learn how to do from the deep spine's capacity for micro movement, rather than the big flexor extensor bits of the body that yank the deep intelligence around and sometimes end us up injuring ourselves. But the body is, the human body in gravity and the way we verticalize with the curves of our spine and the curves of our body is really a body that is always moving through a rotation, through the horizontal plane. So if I want to give you a present and I say to you, here's your present, I bought you this, you would go, "Ooh, what's going on?" Or if I went, "Here, I bought you this present, I really want you to have it," you would go, "What's going on?" And that's because there's too much flexion or too much extension, which are old postures. We call them postures of symmetry, and they belie control and uncertainty, hesitation, lying, all sorts of things. When a person's like that and they're saying, "What do you mean? There's nothing wrong. I'm perfectly fine with what you just said." You go, "What?" The same, this is not a person who's very calm right now. But when I say to you, "I brought you a present, I want to give you a present," and I'm moving through the spiral across the horizontal plane, not just here, you feel space and you realize there's depth in the offer and there's space for you to respond. "Oh, you brought me a present, but I don't want it," or whatever. It's different from this. But we need to learn to discover that this flexion extension is actually a wavy line which runs very deep in the body and is always leading to a wavy line with a curve. Okay, so now look at those two big themes. And we'll just start standing. And just whatever you need to do, I'm looking out at the rain. Beautiful colors. Whatever you need to do to be in your feet and in the sense of your own weight. Not correcting and over-aligning and getting super symmetrical or getting it all right, but in, through, down, into the earth. And also up and open. So weight, roots, wings. And then we'll just let the head go forward. And we'll just let that bend and let it fold into the ribs. Let the knees bend. Let yourself hang. So depending on your back or any injuries, you can hang, but that's always more troubling to the spine than support. So you can support at the knees, or you can support on an object. Or if there's really no issues, you can also hang. And then we'll come up and we'll just open. Just rooting and lifting, lifting and rooting. And then coming back down. Feel how we bend. Let it be really high up. Let your touch be a not looking at yourself touch, but just really gardening. Touching, sensing how hard is the earth. Are there any stones? Letting the arms hang. Folding through. And coming up. Coming up, just easy, simple. Not too far this way, not too far that way just yet, just up. And then again, dropping through, maybe touching the back, the sacrum, the buttocks, the thighs. Feel the feet opening. And just touching the foot, toes. So moving can be like doodling or scribbling in a notebook. It doesn't have to be a sentence which is going somewhere or recording something. It doesn't need to be that kind of information. It can be more formative than informative. I'm just moving, I'm sensing the weight, I'm being near to myself. Yeah. Okay, so remember last time also, in a lot of the classes, we've talked about this lifting of the ribs off the pelvis, or this separating that we do here where there are no ribs, here in the land of mountaintops, here. If there were ribs, if that's how we had been built, then the question of lifting would be moot. It would be some other thing, barrel. I'm this barrel being, but it isn't. We actually, the ribs stop, but the tissue of the transversal abdominal muscle is like ribs. It's striated. So this striation of the ribs continues, but it becomes flesh and liftable because this transversus, when you activate it, it squeezes, and the squeezing is part of what activates this lift as the legs root down. Lift your toes and feel your feet open and your heels travel away from your toes. And be in that rooting, even really open the pipes of the legs, the backs of the knees open, and breathe. Yeah. And then here, when we lift the arms, that's very often why we lift the arms in standing poses. I lift the stuff. That's what arms do, as well as my gaze. I gaze out the window and I'm lifted. Yeah. Then the hands come back. And then I let myself settle and I fold. And I fold. Okay, so now have a look. We're going to do the same roll down, however you want to do it. Just watch me. So I'm going to roll down. I'm going to roll down. I'm going to bend the knees. And I'm going to get to here, elbows to the knees. And you can see that my tail is a wolf's tail. It's going down. It's not a squirrel's tail. And my antlers are going down. And then, I'll just step back. So I'm in this position, so I take it in, I'm on my heels and toes, my feet are widening, my antlers are heavy, my tail is heavy. Now watch me, and then I'm just going to change tail. So from a wolf's tail, I'm going to get a squirrel's tail. Wolf's tail, squirrel's tail. And you see, it has repercussions through my whole spine, and my antlers go up. So just play with that. Drop your antlers, drop your tail,
Try to not look at yourself from the outside, although it's very helpful to have a peek in the mirror as well. But then try to do it from the inside. You've got to let the belly hang, and you've got to let that come up and let the antlers come up. So this kind of concavity starts to happen through the torso, and then back to antlers down and wolf's tail, and then back to squirrel's tail, antlers up, and then I'm just going to push myself up. Yeah, and you may feel a lift and an openness. A lift and an openness. So we come to our sense of weight. Very quickly, that brings us near, because it's not something you look at, weight. It's a proprioceptive reality. So I've got to be in myself. And very quickly, we notice that it's linked to breathing, because if I hold my breath or I don't let myself breathe because I'm frightened, I'm not going to be in my weight. I'm going to be in my, I'm leaving here. Yeah, so I'm in my weight, I'm near, I'm with my bones, my water. So we've been with that basic vocabulary many, many times. The sense of weight, we are weight bearers. Not only the story and the content of my weight or the affect, I like my weight, I don't. Not only that, but mostly, if we can, the percept, the feeling of being this waterfall of weight that drops into the feet or rebounds up the weight. And then we can be in a flexion, front bend. And surprisingly, we can also be in lots of different curious extensions or backbends. And you will notice that this backbend sustains itself because the pressure system above and below the diaphragm is such that if you come into extension, you have a force between positive and negative that is pushing up. So I can kind of be here. But the minute I drop my head, then I can't just be here because I want to fall. I have to effort. But if I really let my tail go back and I let my sit bones widen and I release along the front of the spine, I can be here. And it's opening, it opens me. And that's where we start to get these long standing back bends, which were the great sort of research that Vanda did in her life, discovering how majestic it was for the spine to really lift and open as we root. Coming back, rolling down. So you could go further down, you could crouch. With your heels on the floor or with your heels off, it changes it slightly. So how deeply we can front bend and how wonderfully, as long as you're not irritating your lower spine. And then we can root and fly up, fly way, way up. And remember, we're not just bending here, we're actually lengthening up and we're extending deep across the thoracic cage, deep into the ribs. We're bending and opening. And the arms are part of the lungs, part of the spine, part of what's lifting and opening. So watch, I'm not just leaning into my lower back. I'm actually way up there, moving in my middle ribs, and I can feel, it's like I'm stretching my heart-lung space, and I can feel the breastbone is being worked from behind. And I come back. Oh, so I hope that was enjoyable.
in terms of beloved poses, because again, they are part of that same wonderful thing that we do, which is we curl up
at night in bed under the duvet. We curl up. We curl up.
We close the door, we turn the lights off. Our autonomic system goes, oh, I'm feeling safe, and now I'm digesting, and it's time for bed. Everything becomes quiet. It's like we start to discharge, and then we're on the sofa or we're in bed, and that's it. We're gone, fast asleep. So, child pose. Like the standing front bend, you just want to make sure that the lower back is not bothered if you've had injuries. And then you don't just want to be in child pose with the head down but the bum up. You want to look for a balance. So you can widen the legs, or you can put, if your legs are taking time to yield, which mine are because of all of this, then I don't go down straight away and come up here. I wait for the pelvis to root down over the heels as I'm breathing. And I just hold myself up, and then slowly I let go. And again, the weight is teaching me. The weight is always talking to the sense of space inside my body, what we eventually call lengthening. So I'm rooting, elbows dropping, palms dropping, pelvis dropping over the heels. And I can come back. So I can just roll down. So meditation is teaching us to balance being with doing. And when we move, or when we're embracing a friend, touching another person, we forget, but it's not just an action. So movement is not just a doing. Movement has a huge component to it, which we would call sensing. So I'm moving, but I'm also sensing, I'm receiving feedback. And it's the same. It's very different if I give you a hug and I'm actually receiving information about that, as opposed to just, So it's more vulnerable making, it's much more intimate, but it's very human, very, very human. And I think also, actually, we are less disturbed on a crowded tube, when we all go back to all of that. When we try to make the separation, it's actually very disturbing to our systems. Whereas if we just let ourselves bump and we acknowledge that we're being touched and jostled, somehow something much more natural happens, which is lovely, which we enjoy. That's what we get when we go into the sea and the waves just jostle us about. There's something it's just wonderful. The human body loves that.
So I'm folding, I'm in my weight, I'm sensing what's happening, what's needed. The pelvis is heavy, the wolf's tail, resting. And you become aware of areas that feel like it's hard to have access to them. So you just become aware, you can touch areas that feel rigid and hardened, or areas that feel just completely collapsed. But then we're going to walk forward. And as you go forward, the bum is going to come up. And slowly the wolf's tail becomes a squirrel's tail. Your torso begins to lengthen. And there you are in this bend, which we were in when we were standing with the squirrel's tail on the head. So you just let yourself into that. Now, if you go, watch me, too far with the pelvis, you start to do something else. So your thighs should be a little bit behind vertical, behind, a little bit, so that there's a feeling that you're leaning back into your pelvis, which causes you to feel that your sit bones are being widened and your pelvic floor is releasing wide. Because watch me, if I'm tense in my pelvic floor, you see, it pulls the tail down. So also if I'm just locked in the pelvic floor. So pelvic floor should be able to breathe like the rest of you. So we want to let it widen, tail comes up. The tail is not the sit bones. The tail is the end of your spine. Yeah. The sit bones are part of the innominate bone, which is the big propeller-shaped unnameable bone of your pelvis, which has a lower bit, which we call the sit bones or the ischial tuberosity, has the big butterfly wing of the ilium, and on the front you have the pubic bones which meet. So the pelvis is widening at the sit bones and the tail is free to go up. And then we're just going to add the toes so that we have this very clear support from the toes. And we drop through. And don't worry about, am I doing this right or wrong? And too much about the shape. Try to balance kind of getting the sense of the shape through what I'm doing and the metaphors, but then finding how it is for you. Right, and then we go back. So you don't need to do this, but what we just did is very similar, but completely different to this. See? I'm folded forward like in child pose, and then I start to let the sit bones widen and the tail goes up, and I start to be here. Here. And being able to make this movement is one of the most wonderful, simple first steps in healing these lower back injuries, which were mostly created by bending forward and then loading it with a weight and being unprepared, or even worse, bending slightly to the side. And this one usually is easier on everyone. So here we are in child pose. Tail dropping, antlers dropping. Hanging out with a sense of weight. Letting the breath move through you. And then the minute you start to walk forward, the spine lengthens, and if you stop, that's fine, that's what happens. You know, you lengthen along, you lengthen your breastbone along your thighs. But then if you keep going, the lengthening starts to pull on your pelvis, and your pelvis comes up. And eventually your bum is up and your tail is up, and you have this wonderful long hanging off of the spine. Long hanging off of the spine. And then instead of standing up, we're just going to push through and come to here. Knees on the floor, toes alive. And then you decide, you know, if you want to just sag, which is okay, but it's kind of less, it affects less of you. Or there's a kind of a living bamboo-y tensegrity thingy, not just hanging, but a kind of going through from the foot all the way up through the body. And that this is lifting and opening up into here. And then we just go back. So this kneeling one, once you get the feeling of where the parts are, it's much easier than the standing one. And if you do, like me, have an injury and then those moments where you feel, uh-oh, my whole back's going to go out, then this is great because it's very simple, very, very safe. It's profoundly biological. Your body's literally begging you, you know, to come away from protecting it in a flexion and to come into a bit of extension so that the sacrum can go, this is the base of the sacrum here, it can go forward into the way the pelvis holds it together. Whereas when things start to go wrong at the sacrum and at the lumbars, often it's because we're opening, sacrum starts to lean back, which is not so biological. And also when we push discs back, that's when the lumbar discs start to be unhappy. But when we've gone this way, this way, this way, you know, we're bringing the spine back, 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 back. So let's just take ourselves through, sliding forward, going into squirrel with the tail up, and then pushing from the toes and coming through. Coming through. And then we can come through, we can go back like we did a moment ago, or we can go back and up. Back and then up. Really bend into the toes. Let the sit bones go up. Let the bum go up. And of course, this is it's a simplification in a way. I'm stressing something. I'm stressing this and this. So I'm simplifying something that we do millions and millions of times, and we don't realize that we're always stuck here or always stuck there. And we don't realize that the body is longing to do its oscillation between in-breath and out-breath, between leaning forward and back, between flexion and extension. You know that it's losing the stillness of its oscillation, undulation, and pendulation. We don't pendulate and oscillate if we don't feel well. We just don't do it. Kids are teaching this to us all the time, as we did to our teachers, and we were told to sit still. But real stillness is a person who feels well. They feel safe, they're in their body, they understand the information that's coming and going, they know that they can say stop, or, you know, and they're able to listen. So kids, when they're playing, that's what they're like. And there is a stillness there.
There is a stillness there because it's very natural. So we're looking to recover that in our adult bodies and in our adult social spaces. We're looking to recover that freedom. Freedom to be here, freedom to be here. If I look at you from here, it's different than if I look at you from here. There are different words. You know, here, I can push. I could say stop. Here, maybe I could say, oh, come. So this in-breath, out-breath, undulation of flexion extension is a very deep movement that's happening in the liquid aqueous river of the spine. And it's lovely to think about it and add images and all of that, but it's also very, very simple. It's just a simple longing. Simple longing. So we're going to do it in standing and come to kneeling just once, and then we'll look in sitting and we'll do a bit of, we'll take that into rotation. So we're just standing. You can use the chair again if you need a support. There. You can begin anywhere. You could bend your knees, you could feel your feet. Who knows? Maybe it's because I'm always up here that I start with this, but it's really up to you. You could feel the weight of your arms. The knees bend, the head goes, and we release. And then we go back up. Little, and then we come down. And we go back up. And we open. So we really feel the opening here. It's not just about the back, although it should be high up and it should feel like the front of your back is opening, front of the ribs. But this is very important. The sternum, the ribs, and the cartilaginous connection, springy connection between rib and sternum, all of that can open on everyone. You know, it just becomes so shortened, and the tissue behind, there's an incredible muscular structure behind the sternum called the transversus thoracis, which looks like a fern or a head. You know, it gets all contracted, and then the way the heart is sitting in the lungs, you know, this just never opens. It never opens. I wonder if I should do yoga. But we want this to open. So everything is extending. The tissue on the front of the sternum, the endothoracic tissue behind, then the pleural tissue with the lungs, and the whole cardiac space with its support columns or spaces, the mediastinum. All of that opens, and behind we have this incredible intricate tapestry of ligaments, all the phreno-pericardic ligaments that become the anterior longitudinal ligament of the spine. All of that can open and it becomes arm. It's not like arm starts here. This is all arm down into the central tendon and the psoas, down to my toes. That's just arms. And then from my arms, it's all legs, all the way down, all the way down. And then, so I'm just these leg arms, and just a leg arm down to here. And then we go that way. We let the tail come up and we let the antlers come up. And then we just zoom up from here. And we roll down. And this time the fingers touch the floor. And we bend, or if it's very easy for you to leave your heels on the floor, go ahead. It takes me hours to get there. So, yeah, and then we roll into the beginning of a very deep front bend, which is the beginning of Malasana, the wreath pose, and all the Bakasana poses.
where you balance on your arms, which we can do another time. But then I'm just going to roll through my toes, which is wonderful, onto the floor, which is wonderful, and down, which is wonderful. And I'm just going to go back. And then I'm going to start to go forward, which is wonderful. And I'm going to connect my toes. Forward, 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 forward. Yeah, really wait for that moment where you feel the sit bones are clear and widening, and then we're going to come through, and then we're going to go back up and high, 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 high. Do you see? So putting your heels on the floor in dog is also wonderful, but you see when I'm there, you can see I'm already beginning to lose my tail. And you want to be able to be intelligent about what you're doing. And so you want to also be able to make this pose, which is a very free sacrum, lumbar to pelvis movement. Huge toes. And I come down and rock. Okay, so this is going to be on the chair. In a way, it's easier, but actually this is the most profound of all the movements. So it's very deep and it's very worth playing with. You know, if no one's watching you at a dinner party, you know, just do this, although the table's going to be in the way, but you can figure something out. We're just going to roll down. We've done this before in standing and kneeling. And we're going to roll back up. And we're going to roll down all the way, like in child pose. So here, I want to feel that I haven't lost the chair. I'm dropping forward. Yeah, and then I can come back. These front bends where you're not so intense about, am I touching my toes or not? You know, touching my toes, but actually, you're actually folding. I'm folding the floor of my mouth, on my throat, on the pipes in my throat. Folding, I'm folding onto my first and second rib. I'm folding my lungs onto my heart. I'm folding at the diaphragm. I'm folding this whole digestive fermenting tract all on itself. And I'm folding forward. It's just pure osteopathy. Pure just letting the body gather itself all the way through. And then we can come back up. All the way back up, all the way. And then I root through my feet and I let the whole upper spine right up into the neck and the head open, open, open. See, otherwise it's just a bend, but then nothing happened here. Can you see? Just bend, or I just bend, but nothing actually happens deep inside. Whereas if I'm lifting and opening and opening and opening and opening, then I'm actually lengthening inside on the front of the back and the back of the front. And I'm, you know, pulling on my heart and my lungs, let's say, through my arm. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. All good. So we're going to roll down. We did this maybe four or five classes ago. We've done this before. We're going to make, just watch me for a moment. We're going to roll down. All wonderful. I'm rooting. I'm using a cushion because the chair is a bit low for me. So here I am. My feet are nicely out there. Then I'm going to go through. And then I'm not going to lift through a very superficial flexion. which just makes me hard. And that's what we're doing all the time. We're flexing and remaining in the sleeve of our body and picking things up and shaking hands and wondering why we're all so grumpy. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to drop through lots of length from tail to antler. Watch, my eyes are open and I'm going to open to the world this way. Do you see? Squirrel's tail, antlers. We've done this in kneeling and standing. So I'm going to open this way. And then at this point, I'm not going to flex again. I'm just going to jump into the unknown and let my arms take me. That's it. And then I'm going to roll down. It's very profound. Don't effort. Even if you don't go so far, just do it your way. But when you're here, it's like your fingers are growing out of your spine, and it's the arms, and your feet become very awake. And we'll do it one more time. Roll down. Huge feet. Sense of weight. Nobody's watching themselves. There's no YouTube through. And then let your, from the periphery, from the fingers, through the hands and arms, shoulders, let that move your spine and let it take you. You'll find that it's like you're undoing and then at the same time making a profound effort deep, deep, deep inside your body. So just take a moment to go for a walk or to kneel or to lie down just for a second, just to settle. So just before we do something else, I hope that was helpful. And if you go back through the classes, you'll see that although every class is standalone, and they're all oriented towards us, towards our beginner's mind, you'll see that this is a theme that is part of establishing a beginning vocabulary and grammar. Weight, nearness, wave of the breath, those are important vocabularies. And then this movement of extension and flexion and noticing that you can have antlers and tail and where you're moving from, that starts to be the grammar. And it's a big part of getting going with the movement practice and understanding your yoga. So I think I'm just going to turn this a bit. So here we are lying on our backs, knees bent, feet on the ground, just noticing what you need as your body starts to lengthen. If you need something under your head, just put a little book, little folded towel. If you're struggling like this, it's very good to put something. I usually and will put a little something under my head.
Thoughts in Solitude by Thomas Merton. Probably not a bad one. Just a little, because it releases, for me, there's a traffic jam at the base of my neck, and it just lets me let go. But if you have a very long, flat neck, then you may want a bit of curve. And so then you can put a rolled towel under your neck, just to let your neck rest. If you've done a lot of ballet and you've been used to doing like that, you may want to just give yourself permission to come out of that a bit and to have that curve. So, and of course, if your sacrum hurts on the floor, you can put a bit of support under your back. Okay, so here we are. Legs are bent, the feet are rooting, and I'm just going to widen my feet a bit. And I'm going to allow the knees to fall towards each other. Okay? So for some of you, this is very easy. The legs just fall towards each other. But if you're like me and you're very, very flexy in your thighs, it's not so easy. So you can widen the feet a little bit more even. You can also just put your hands here, just so you relax. And if the whole thing starts to judder, it's fine. Nothing terrible is happening. You can allow the judder. So we want the knees to fall towards each other. And what that does is it allows the relationship of femur to pelvis to settle. It's like the femurs, these big bones, are allowed to sink into their home socket. And then we're just going to let the legs fall apart. All the way or just a little bit of the way. Put your hands. Yeah. I was out running this afternoon, so there's no point in forcing it because they've been very active. So you can just hold the way I'm doing, because the holding releases the range inside the joint. That's also why we can put cushions when we're sitting cross-legged, because the cushions actually allow the joint, deep in the articulation for something new to happen, whereas forcing doesn't. That's just traction, and the body gets alerted and shortened. So, and then we come back, and we're knees towards each other, sensing the weight, touching if I want to touch the groins. Wonderful. Feet are alive. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to let both legs, now that they're soft and leaning towards each other, you don't need to make your feet symmetrical or put them together. We're just going to let both legs move towards the right. And within moments, you can feel that your pelvis is tipping towards the right. And what you have done is from this passive flexion, front bend, you've come into a rotation or twist. You can touch the front, you can touch the back. You don't need to put one foot on top of the other. The asymmetry of where you've gone is wonderful for this. And also this is very safe for lower back and sacrum issues. Then I can come back, I can use the muscles, or I can use my hand. I can come back and I can just roll through to the other side. And again, you can feel that the pelvis is tipping and a rotation is traveling up the spine. And usually as we get to the diaphragm or the first ribs, we notice that the rotation starts to dissipate. And up here, it's as if nothing had happened, and this has not fallen over to the left side. So just enjoy. Wobbling the head, sensing where you are, and we're going to go the other way. Let the movement travel through, from the feet, through the legs, up through the pelvis, into the spine. Don't watch it and don't worry about it being correct. If something's uncomfortable, make an adjustment. So from the foot to my belly button, more or less, I'm spiraling. And from my belly button up, I'm quite still and rooted. Okay, now as I roll to the left, I'm going to let my right arm come to the left. I've rolled onto my side. And then as I roll my legs to the right, I'm going to let my left arm come over. So we've spent a number of classes playing with this. You can look back. This is really a movement which comes from all sorts of places, but it's shown very beautifully in the work of Feldenkrais, Moshe Feldenkrais, and it's a wonderful movement that takes us through the rotating, spirally nature of the body. And you can accelerate it so that you actually start to come up. Roll through, and then I've got my elbow and my reach, and I kind of come up. And then I roll through, and I come up. And I roll through, and I come up. And I could come all the way up to sitting. And then I could roll through, roll through, roll through, roll through, all the way up to sitting. So going to the floor like this is a lot less strenuous than going to the floor in a sit-up position. You know, this is all roll, roll, rolling, rolling. You know, before you know it, you're sort of rolling to the supermarket and then rolling back home and then rolling over to your yoga mat and rolling over to where you want to meditate. Rolling. So rolling through, rolling through, rolling through, coming around, changing direction. Changing direction. Yeah. One of the things we do in yoga is we roll, or in judo, or whatever it is that you're doing. As we roll over the surfaces or the container of the body, we actually begin to have a very profound experience of volume. And weight and volume go together since we left the womb. And when we've been very disturbed by life or by a trauma, by a car accident, the sense of where I am in my weight and in my bones and the sense of the contained volume goes off. So then the relationships go off. The way I moderate my distance with you and my independence and, you know, starts to go all wrong and we're not happy with our social engagement. So being silly and rolling and practicing gives us back our embodiment, which is a huge gift to the world, because we have these accidents of perception where we realize, oh, I'm always like this. No wonder. And we learn and we can change. As we change the context for how we are and how we move, we change the context of the world, and what it feels like the world is giving us. Often we're blaming, but very often it's where I am that has already predicated what I'm going to get. I'm in flexion and one pointed, and I'm shooting that arrow, and of course I'm going to get an argument. I don't have a backspace. So as we play with this, we start to recover, and it's very sweet. I know what I get up to, and then I play, and then sometimes I can bring a tiny bit of that through my meditation practice to relationships that can improve.
So let's just lie forward. Let's take a moment. You can be forehead down on your nose, that's fine, but it's also quite nice to just support your head a bit and let your head turn a little bit one way for some breaths and then the other way. Usually one way is a lot less comfortable than the other way. Don't force the rotation. Don't force the rotation. You can use the hand that's on the back of your head to support you up a bit, so you're not forcing. You're just letting, through the hands, you're just letting the head settle in its rotation as that rotation travels down into the neck. And I can go the other way. Okay, so you can also lie like this. I'm going to turn my head to the side because of the microphone. I'm going to be like this. Arms can be here or way up here or one more than the other, just so you're easy across the chest. And then I'm just going to bring my right leg, this one. I'm not going to lift it up high. I'm going to leave it kind of long and lollopy on the floor, but I'm going to bring it towards the other leg and I'm going to bring it over. And very quickly, I feel that my pelvis is tipping that way. So I'm just going to let myself into that as I bring the leg over. If you lift the leg too high, you work out here with the quadratus lumborum and all sorts of other things, which is also fine. But if you leave the legs close, you're working much, much closer to the spine. So then at home, I mean, not at home, that's where you are probably, but on your own, you can play with, working like this. But today we're just keeping the legs close and we're bringing the leg back. And I've met the wall, so I'm just going to move. I'm going to bring the leg back. But the upper body shouldn't rush off, because then I don't have a twist. I've only got my whole body just turned onto its side. So the upper body wants to remain on the floor as you play just with the leg, taking your pelvis and your lumbars. And then we come back and we breathe. And the left leg goes over. Try to let the aliveness of the foot be the thing that's changing everything, rather than the muscles, the big muscles of the leg and the back. Wonderful. So we're just going to go like that. And we'll just close. You may need a sock or a sweater or something to wrap around your leg, but we'll just close like this. Going to bend the right leg at the knee, which is already a very profound movement. If your back starts to feel all soggy and horrible, lying on the floor is already an extension, and then bending the knees increases that. Very profound. And then, of course, if you reach for the leg, that's even more. This isn't a competition. We're just participating. So you do what you can. If you can't reach, just wrap a sweater around there or a belt. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap hands. So I'm going to hold my right leg with my left hand. And this is a profoundly healing movement for the sacrum. profoundly. It's a bend in the back bend direction, but it's also a rotation. And then I'm going to reach up with my arm. So my leg remains quiet, but my arm kind of lifts me up. Maybe make a sound, just so you know that it's all going to be okay. Just open it up. Yeah. And letting go, and then the other side. Yeah, so I have to go slower on this side. It's very different. So I can't just lift right away. I have to wait. Yeah. And then try not to push on the straight leg side, but really to lift and to allow the sacrum to do its back bending and rotation and healing, and same with the lumbars. And then let go, and we're just going to push our way back into child pose for a moment and just rest. And then just come forward and lie on your back. And the book, if you need it. And you can be bent-legged or straight-legged, depending. So you needn't get up. I'm just going to leave you now. Say goodbye until next week. I might want to just hang out on the floor for a little bit. So lovely seeing you all on the list online, and wishing you a good week of yoga practice and ever deepening silence in your meditation. Bye-bye, everyone. See you next week.